I'm looking to think about how to approach the LSAT. I'm taking it this Monday, and I'm especially thinking about what sort of mindset I should bring into the LSAT. I've been able to do pretty well on my practice tests, and so I want to be able to replicate that on test day and not have anything get in the way of that.
Cool. Great. How many practice tests have you done up to this point?
Ooh, more than I can count. I could count it up, but it's pretty high. Last week I scored a 179 and a 178. So I'm hoping to replicate that on test day.
That's incredible. Well, whatever you're doing is clearly working, so I don't really have a whole lot to change for you. The only thing I would ask about is just to make sure, were those practice tests taken under strict test day-like conditions?
Yes, I did an experimental. I did, the time 35 minutes with a break after the third section, and didn't really take a break for anything else other than that.
So it sounds like you're doing everything right. And honestly, I wouldn't want to mess with that or tell you anything different. My only cautionary note would be to not do too many more, because you want to walk in fresh on Monday. So are you planning to do any additional practice tests?
I was thinking of doing one either today or tomorrow. This past Monday, I scored a 173, which was significantly lower. So that didn't want that to shake my confidence. So I'm just hoping to do one more just to hopefully get it back up in that higher range before test day.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. Just do one more.
Okay.
You could do one on the Thursday, Friday, even Saturday would be okay. But then Sunday,
Okay.
I want you to completely rest. Don't do anything LSAT related. And then just walk in on Monday and kill it. Maybe do a few warm-up questions before you walk in. But that's really all I would suggest. I think that you're doing well. And I know 173 is on the lower end for you, but that's still an amazing score for the vast majority of people. And so that would not be a bad score for you either, actually. That would still be excellent to get you into a top 14. So just know that you want that top score, but even if you get something a little bit lower, that's still in the top percentiles, or top 1%, top 3%. You could still be perfectly fine in the admissions process. And the LSAT as a whole is incredibly important, but no one particular test date will make or break you, because you could always retake. You could take January and still apply this cycle totally fine.
Okay, yeah. That's another question that I had. I was thinking about taking the January one if I didn't do as well as I'd done in the past on this November one. Would you say there's a certain threshold, or is it more personal preference for how low it would be in order for me to retake? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's really personal preference for you. I mean, even if you scored at your target score, you could get a few points more by retaking just through luck alone. Let's say you got a 175. Most people would not retake that score, but if all your averages and your practice tests were 178, then maybe retaking you do a few points better, and that would be great, even better. And if not, no big deal, because law schools only take the highest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was looking on, I think it was Yale's website. I think they used to say that they look at the highest, but they also consider like a holistic set of factors, including other test scores. Is that the case, or do they strictly look at the highest one, would you say?
I'm extremely skeptical of that idea. I mean, saying that they take a holistic approach sounds nice, especially for those who don't have the numbers, but you have to look at their incentives. What does the ABA require of them? What do the US News rankings require? They require the highest score of matriculating students, and that's what they consider at the end of the day. A lot of the language, maybe not for Yale, but for other schools, it's outdated language. They just haven't bothered to update it because it still sounds nicer. And what does consider really mean? Yes, they will see all the scores on your record, all the scores on your report from the past 5 years, but when it comes down to actually making admissions decisions, the highest score is what they have incentive to use.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. I was also thinking one of the sort of stumbling blocks that I've run into in the past is being able to do really well on like the first 3 games of a logic game section. And then for some reason getting tied up on the 4th one, even making silly mistakes just because of I maybe mentally frazzled or something like that. Do you have any thoughts on avoiding that on test day?
Yeah, sure. Just slow down and make sure that you thoroughly understand the initial setup and all of the rules before you move on. One little careless misreading can have an enormous impact on a game because it's carrying through to all the questions that you're solving. So I would say maybe speed up a little bit on the easier games while still double checking the rules. but then give yourself a little bit more time for that last game because it also is likely to be tougher than at least some of the others.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. One of my other like struggle areas has been reading comprehension inference path questions. I'm able to get them right sometimes, but even if I'm able to get them right, it's definitely a slower slog for me, and I feel less certain about it. So it's something that I would want to flag each time. Do you have any tips or suggestions for that?
Yeah, sure. Inferential questions will require a bit more reading between the lines, although there is
Yeah.
always support in the passage for whatever the correct answer is. And so, as part of your review process, I would suggest going back and finding the lines for every single correct answer for anything that gave you trouble, because there is always support in the text somewhere. People will talk about reading between the lines as if it gives you license to go beyond the passage. It's not really giving you license to go beyond. It's rather a paraphrase or an inference you can make from the text that's already there. But think of the standard of proof for an inference question in logical reasoning. It is in the text. Maybe it's a contrapositive, maybe they're using synonyms, but it is the same idea.
Okay.
So for example, if someone said the only days that I do not work are on the weekend, that means by negation that every day that you do work on all of the other days of the week. We can make an inference about what is not stated based on what was stated.
Yeah.
So but a quick scan will not give you the 5 days of the work week, but you can infer it from learning that the only days you don't work are weekend days.
Okay. That makes sense. One thing that I've wondered about in going into test day, is it helpful are there any mindset sort of things on the day of the test that you recommend, or any certain ways of approaching the test? Like sometimes I think more of like it should be confident, but I don't want to be overconfident at the same time either. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that you should keep at the top of your mind all the successes you've had up to this point. I mean, you are definitely in the top 1% of test takers based on your practice test scores alone. I mean, getting low 170s, mid 170s, high 170s, very few people achieve those even on practice tests. So you should congratulate yourself for that and walk in with confidence because of that. Now, in terms of overconfidence, of course, that is something to be aware of. Recognize that the test makers are very tricky. They're very sneaky. They devote their entire careers to laying traps for students. But also know that you have mastered a lot of those based on your studying up to this point, as evidenced by the practice test scores that you've achieved. So walk in with the mindset that you know this exam better than virtually everybody else who's taking it, and that you're going to dominate it when you walk in. And have but also during your review in the next few days, pay special attention to the problems that gave you trouble and what tricks that you were uniquely prone to falling for on those questions, so you can avoid making them again.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Do you think that on test day, insofar as you can comment on this, what would you anticipate to be the harder section? And what can you comment on it all? Like, do you think there's going to be a harder LG or like a harder LR with a lower LG and that sort of thing? Because I know that section difficulty can vary bit by bit, right?
Yeah, section difficulty can vary. Predictions is not really a game that I play. I think it's risky, and I will only want to make predictions when there's sufficient evidence to do so.
Sure.
So I'm not going to make any specific predictions about your LSAT, but I will say that logic games have gotten tougher over time. There are more curveball games. And so I would want you to have practiced a lot of the tougher, weirder logic games that have shown up in recent years. But the tests are equated. One exam might have harder games, one might have harder reading comp, but it all evens out in the end.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Good. Do you have any other thoughts as to mental performance or that sort of thing in terms of test day routine or that sort of thing?
Yeah, I actually have an entire playlist focused on LSAT test day preparation, including properly simulating test day conditions and overcoming nerves and anxiety and stress. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out. I think for simulating test day, you've probably done a lot of that right already, but you might want to review that video in case there's anything that you haven't done that you might want to consider. Even things like eating the same snack during your practice test that you will be eating on test day, or having a Ziploc bag next to you during your last practice test, just as you will have one next to you on the actual LSAT itself. And then for nerves and anxiety, things like mindfulness meditation or different ways that you might try out to relax, I think could be really useful. And so I would say check out that playlist and those videos in particular.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure to do that. Thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah, of course. What would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
The biggest insight is I really liked how you mentioned the importance of simulating test day, even down to the details of the Ziploc bag and the snack that you eat and that sort of thing. That's something that I hadn't done, and I think that's something I'll do on my next practice test. That was very actionable and helpful.
Excellent. Well, I think you're well situated to do better than the vast majority of test takers, and I'm excited to see how it turns out for you. Is there anything else you would need in order to feel complete for today?
No, I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad we connected, and please keep in touch. Let me know how it goes.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.